Sofia Martinez was a quiet girl with secrets. Not the kind that got you in trouble, but the kind that made grown-ups stop and stare with their mouths hanging open. At 12 years old, she looked like any other seventh grader. Slightly awkward, with braces, fond of colorful hair clips, and usually buried in a book. But Sofia carried a gift that very few knew about. A talent so extraordinary that it seemed almost out of place in someone so young. The Martinez family lived in a modest two-story home in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. Except for Sofia's, her father, Luis, worked as a high school music teacher, and her mother, Carla, taught piano lessons from their living room. Music filled their house from morning until evening, scales being practiced, songs being learned, and the occasional improvised family jam session. For the Martinez family, music wasn't just a hobby. It was the family language. Sofia had been singing before she could properly talk. Her first attempts at melody came before her second birthday, humming along with her mother's lullabies with surprising accuracy. By age 5, while other children were learning to tie their shoelaces, Sofia could match pitch perfectly and carry complex melodies. Her parents exchanged knowing glances whenever she sang, recognizing something rare and precious in their daughter's voice. "She has a gift," Carla would whisper to Luis after tucking Sofia in at night. "It's like her voice already knows what to do." They found her a vocal coach when she turned 7, Mrs. Abernathy, an older woman with steel gray hair who had once performed with major opera companies across Europe. The first time Mrs. Abernathy heard Sofia sing, she sat very still for nearly a full minute afterward. "In 40 years of teaching," she finally said, looking at Sofia's parents with wide eyes, "I have never—" She stopped, cleared her throat, and tried again. "Your daughter has what we call a once-in-a-generation voice." And so began Sofia's classical training. 3 times a week she would visit Mrs. Abernathy's home studio, with its faded photos of grand opera houses and shelves full of yellowing sheet music. Sofia absorbed everything: proper breathing techniques, Italian pronunciation, the emotional meaning behind arias written centuries ago. Her voice grew stronger, more controlled, more beautiful. But there was a problem. The first time her parents arranged for her to perform at a small community recital, Sofia froze. Complete total paralysis. She stood on the small stage looking out at perhaps 30 friendly faces and felt her throat close up entirely. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred with tears. After a painful minute of silence, her father had to come up and lead her gently off the stage. "It's okay, Mija," he said afterward, holding her while she cried in the car. Many great performers get stage fright. They tried again 6 months later. Then again the following year. Each time the result was the same. Sofia could sing with breathtaking beauty in the comfort of her home, or in Mrs. Abernathy's studio, but put her in front of an audience, and her extraordinary gift vanished behind a wall of terror. By the time she turned 12, Sofia and her parents had come to an understanding. No more public performances, no more putting her through that particular kind of torture. If she wanted to sing just for them and for Mrs. Abernathy, that would be enough. "The most important thing is that you love music," her mother told her. "Whether anyone else ever hears you sing doesn't matter." Sofia knew her parents meant well, but she could see the shadow of disappointment in their eyes sometimes. Not disappointment in her, but in the situation, that something so beautiful remained hidden, like keeping a masterpiece painting in a closet where no one could see it. She practiced diligently anyway, spending hours in her bedroom with the door closed, singing along to recordings of Maria Callas and Renee Fleming. She learned arias from La Bohème and Madama Butterfly, her young voice somehow capturing the mature emotions of love and loss with uncanny authenticity. When she sang, Sofia felt transported to another world where her shyness didn't matter, where there was only the pure expression of feeling through sound. Her room became her sanctuary, decorated with posters of opera houses instead of pop stars. Her bookshelf held biographies of great sopranos rather than typical teen novels. While her classmates listened to the latest hits, Sofia secretly immersed herself in Puccini, Verdi, and Mozart. It wasn't that she disliked modern music, she enjoyed it well enough, but classical music and opera spoke to something deep inside her. "You're an old soul," Mrs. Abernathy told her once. "Some people spend decades trying to understand this music. You seem to have been born understanding it." On a warm Friday evening in May, Luis came home from school with a special announcement. I made reservations for tomorrow night, he said during dinner, looking excited. At Bella Notte. Sophia looked up from her plate of spaghetti. Bella Notte was the fanciest Italian restaurant in town, known for its authentic cuisine and, more importantly to the Martinez family, its weekend opera performances. Local and traveling opera singers would perform while guests dined, bringing a touch of cultural sophistication to their small city. What's the occasion? Carla asked, raising an eyebrow. Luis grinned. Do we need an occasion to enjoy good food and good music? Plus, I heard from a colleague that Elisa Donati is performing there this weekend. At the mention of that name, Sophia nearly dropped her fork. Elisa Donati was a rising star in the opera world, a soprano who had recently performed with the Metropolitan Opera in New York. She had a warm, rich voice that Sophia had listened to countless times on recordings. Really? Elisa Donati here? Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father nodded, pleased by her reaction. Apparently, she's visiting family in the area and agreed to do a few performances. We're lucky to get a table. They've been booked solid since word got out. Sophia barely slept that night. The thought of hearing Elisa Donati in person, in the intimate setting of a restaurant rather than a massive opera house, was almost too exciting to bear. She spent hours listening to Donati's recordings, studying the subtle ways the soprano used her breath, how she could shift from powerful projection to delicate pianissimo in a single phrase. The next evening, Sophia took unusual care with her appearance, choosing her nicest dress, a deep blue one with small white flowers that her grandmother had given her for Christmas. She brushed her long, dark hair until it shone and even asked her mother if she could wear a tiny bit of lip gloss. My goodness, Carla said with a smile as Sophia emerged from her room. You look beautiful, honey. Bella Notte was even more elegant than Sophia had imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from a high ceiling, casting warm light over tables covered with crisp white cloths. The walls were decorated with murals depicting scenes from Italian opera and countryside views of Tuscany. A small raised platform served as a performance area, positioned so that most tables had a good view. The maitre d' led them to their table, which was closer to the performance space than Sophia had expected. Her father must have requested special seating. As they settled in, Sophia noticed the small grand piano in the corner of the platform, already staffed by a pianist who was casually playing soft background music. The performance starts in about 20 minutes, their waiter informed them, as he handed out menus. Signora Donati will perform 3 sets throughout the evening. Sophia could barely focus on choosing her meal. Her eyes kept drifting to the performance area, imagining what it would be like when Elisa Donati appeared. Would she be as magnificent in person as she sounded on recordings? Their appetizers had just arrived when the lights dimmed slightly. The pianist transitioned from background music to a more formal introduction, and a hush fell over the restaurant. And then, Elisa Donati walked onto the small platform. She was smaller than Sophia had imagined, petite with an elegant posture that made her seem taller. Her black dress was simple but sophisticated, adorned only with a strand of pearls at her neck. Her dark hair was swept up in a classic style that emphasized her expressive face. She smiled warmly at the restaurant patrons, nodded to the pianist, and without any microphone, true opera singers rarely needed amplification, began to sing. The first notes of Quando m'en va from La Bohème filled the restaurant, and Sophia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Donati's voice was even more beautiful in person, rich with overtones that recordings couldn't fully capture. She sang with seemingly effortless power, her voice soaring to the restaurant's high ceiling and wrapping around everyone present like an embrace. Sophia forgot about her food. She forgot about her parents sitting across from her. She forgot about everything except the music and the woman creating it. Without realizing it, she leaned forward in her chair, her lips slightly parted, completely entranced. She knew this aria intimately, had sung it herself countless times in her bedroom. But hearing it performed this way, by a true master of the craft, was an entirely different experience. When the aria ended, the restaurant erupted in applause. Sophia clapped until her hands hurt, her eyes never leaving the soprano. As Donati began her second piece, Sophia found herself silently mouthing the words, her breath naturally matching the singer's phrasing. This was what she wanted, what she dreamed of, to move people with her voice the way Elisa Donati was doing now. If only she wasn't so afraid. Throughout the first set, Sophia remained completely focused on the performance, barely touching her food despite her mother's gentle reminders. What Sophia didn't notice was that as the evening progressed, Elisa Donati had begun to glance in her direction between songs. Intrigued by the intense concentration on the young girl's face, a look she recognized from her own childhood. The look of someone who didn't just love music, but understood it deeply. As Donati finished her first set and the normal buzz of restaurant conversation resumed, Sophia finally took a bite of her now-cool pasta, her mind still echoing with the beautiful music she'd just experienced, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. As the applause for Elisa Donati's first set faded into the regular sounds of clinking glasses and dinner conversations, Sophia sat back in her chair, eyes still fixed on the now empty performance area. Her parents exchanged knowing smiles across the table. "Earth to Sophia," her father Luis said gently, tapping the table near her plate. "Your food's getting cold." Sophia blinked, coming back to reality. "Sorry," she murmured, picking up her fork. "She's just so amazing. Did you hear how she controlled her breathing in Umbeldi? And that high note at the end of, 'Yes, honey,'" her mother Carla cut in with a chuckle. "She's remarkable. But so is this risotto, which you've barely touched." Sophia nodded and took a bite, but her mind remained elsewhere, replaying Donati's performance, mentally noting techniques she wanted to try during her next practice session. The restaurant bustled around them, waiters balancing trays of steaming pasta, the soft clink of wine glasses, bursts of laughter from nearby tables. But Sophia was lost in her own world of music. What she didn't notice was that across the restaurant, Elisa Donati was watching her. The soprano had stepped into the small back room that served as a makeshift green room, sipping water and reviewing her selections for the next set. But something about the young girl with the intense focus had caught her attention. Between her first and second songs, Donati had noticed the girl mouthing the words. Not just random parts, but every line with perfect timing. It wasn't the behavior of someone who merely liked opera. It was the behavior of someone who lived it. After 15 minutes of rest, Donati emerged from the back room. Instead of immediately returning to the performance area, she did something unusual. She began to make her way between the tables, greeting patrons with warm smiles, accepting compliments with gracious nods. But she was moving in a specific direction. Sophia was midway through explaining to her parents a particularly difficult passage in one of the arias when she felt a presence at their table. Looking up, she froze. Elisa Donati was standing right there, not 3 feet away, smiling directly at her. "Hello," the soprano said, her speaking voice almost as musical as her singing. "I couldn't help noticing how intently you were listening. Are you an opera fan?" Sophia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. It was as if her stage fright had materialized even though she wasn't the one performing. Her father smoothly stepped in. "My daughter is a huge admirer of yours, Ms. Donati. We have several of your recordings at home." Donati's smile widened. "I'm flattered." Her eyes remained on Sophia, who was staring up at her with a mixture of awe and terror. "What's your name?" "Si, Sophia," the girl finally managed, her voice barely audible above the restaurant noise. "Sophia," Donati repeated. "That's a beautiful name. Very musical." She gestured to the empty chair at their table. "May I sit for a moment? I have a few minutes before my next set." Sophia's parents immediately nodded, looking somewhat starstruck themselves. Luis quickly moved their water glasses to make more room. "Thank you," Donati said, settling gracefully into the chair. Up close, Sophia could see tiny laugh lines around the soprano's eyes. She wasn't young, probably in her late 30s, but she had the timeless elegance of someone completely at ease with herself. "So, Sophia," Donati continued, turning those warm eyes toward the girl, "tell me what piece from tonight you've enjoyed most so far." Sophia swallowed hard. This was Elisa Donati asking her opinion about music. It was like having Leonardo da Vinci ask what you thought of his sketches. I loved your Un bel dì," Sophia said, her voice gaining a touch of confidence when speaking about something she knew well. "The way you tapered the phrase un fil di fumo was so... She struggled to find a simple way to express a complex musical idea. So transparent? Donati suggested, a curious look crossing her face. "Yes." Sophia's eyes lit up, like the smoke the character is describing. "You made it sound like it was floating away." Donati tilted her head slightly, studying Sophia with growing interest. That's exactly what I was trying to convey. Most people just comment on the high notes. Oh, those were beautiful too, Sophia added quickly. But it's the quiet moments that really tell the story. Now Donati was looking at Sophia with undisguised surprise. She turned to Sophia's parents. Your daughter has quite an ear for musical interpretation. She comes from a musical family, Carla explained, placing a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. My husband teaches music and I give piano lessons. Ah, that explains it. Donati nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing there might be more to the story. She turned back to Sophia. Do you play an instrument too, Sophia? Sophia glanced at her parents, who gave her encouraging nods. I sing, she said softly. She sings opera, Luis added with quiet pride. Donati's eyebrows rose. Opera, at your age? That's unusual. Sophia has been training classically since she was 7, Carla explained. Her vocal teacher says she has exceptional potential. Sophia wanted to sink into her chair. She loved singing, but talking about it with strangers, especially with someone like Elisa Donati, made her uncomfortable. It felt like making promises she couldn't keep. Donati sensed the girl's discomfort. What composers do you enjoy singing most, Sophia? She asked, shifting the focus to something less personal. This question brightened Sophia immediately. Puccini, she answered without hesitation. And Mozart. I'm working on Porgy Amor right now, but it's challenging because the phrases are so long. That's from The Marriage of Figaro, Donati said, clearly impressed. That's a demanding piece for someone your age. The breath control alone is quite difficult. Sophia nodded eagerly. Mrs. Abernathy, she's my teacher, has me do special breathing exercises every day. She says my lungs need to be strong enough to support a full phrase without breaking the line. Mrs. Abernathy sounds like an excellent teacher, Donati said. Then after a moment's hesitation, she asked carefully, Have you performed publicly yet? The light in Sophia's eyes dimmed. She shook her head, looking down at her plate. Luis cleared his throat. Sophia has some challenges with stage fright, he explained diplomatically. Ah, Donati said, her voice softening with understanding. That's something many performers struggle with. I certainly did at your age, Sophia looked up surprised. You did? Donati nodded. My first recital, I was 8 years old. I was supposed to sing a simple folk song. When I saw all those faces staring at me, I burst into tears and ran off stage. Really? Sophia couldn't imagine the confident woman before her ever being afraid to perform. Really, Donati confirmed. My teacher at the time, a terrifying old Italian man named Maestro Bartoli, was furious. But my mother was wiser. She told me that feeling fear isn't the problem. The problem is letting fear make decisions for you. Sophia absorbed these words, turning them over in her mind. She'd never thought of it quite that way before. How did you get over it? She asked. Donati smiled. I didn't, not completely. I still get nervous before performances. But I learned to use that energy rather than let it paralyze me. She leaned in slightly as if sharing a secret. And I started by singing for smaller groups. Just my parents, then a few family friends, then slightly larger gatherings. Building confidence step by step. The pianist at the performance area played a short musical cue, signaling that the next set would begin soon. Donati glanced over her shoulder and nodded. I should get back, she said, rising from the chair. It was lovely meeting you, Sophia, and you as well, she added, nodding to Luis and Carla. As she turned to leave, Donati paused, looking back at Sophia with an expression the girl couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and inspiration. What aria do you know best? Donati asked suddenly. Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the question. O mio babbino caro, she answered truthfully. It was the first full aria she had mastered, and she had sung it hundreds of times in the privacy of her bedroom. Donati nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Good choice. It's short but requires real emotion. She seemed to be considering something. Well, enjoy the rest of the performance, Sophia. Perhaps we'll speak again afterward. With that, she returned to the performance area, leaving Sophia staring after her in wonder. Had she really just had a conversation about opera with Elisa Donati? It seemed impossible, like something from a dream. Well, Luis said, looking slightly dazed himself. That was unexpected. She was so nice, Carla added, squeezing Sophia's hand. And she seemed genuinely impressed by your knowledge, honey. Sophia nodded, but her mind was spinning with everything Donati had said, especially about stage fright. The idea that someone as accomplished as Elisa Donati still got nervous before performances was strangely comforting. Maybe feeling afraid wasn't a sign of weakness after all. Maybe it was just part of caring deeply about something. As the lights dimmed again for the second set, Sophia found herself watching Donati with new eyes. She wasn't just seeing a distant figure to admire anymore. She was seeing someone who had once been where Sophia was now, afraid but passionate about music. Someone who had found a way forward. Donati began her second set with an aria from Don Giovanni, her voice filling the restaurant with the sound of heartbreak and defiance. But throughout her performance, she seemed to glance at Sophia's table more frequently than before. Once, during a particularly emotional passage, their eyes met directly, and Donati gave an almost imperceptible nod, as if they were sharing a private understanding about the music. Sophia felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she began to wonder if her voice was meant to remain hidden forever. If Elisa Donati could overcome her fears, was it possible that Sophia could too? Not immediately, perhaps, and maybe not on a grand scale, but somehow, some way, could she find the courage to let her voice be heard? She didn't realize it yet, but Elisa Donati was wondering the exact same thing, and as the soprano concluded her second aria to enthusiastic applause, an idea was taking shape in her mind, an idea that would change Sophia's life forever. Elisa Donati's second set ended to thunderous applause. As the restaurant patrons returned to their meals and conversations, Sophia sat in silent amazement, replaying every note in her head. The encounter with the famous soprano felt like a dream, something she would tell Mrs. Abernathy about during her next lesson. "Would you like dessert?" the waiter asked, appearing at their table with menus. "What do you think, Sophia?" her father Luis asked. "The tiramisu here is supposed to be excellent." Sophia nodded, though food was the last thing on her mind. She was already dreading the end of the evening, knowing that Donati had only one set remaining before the night would be over. It felt like standing at the edge of something magical, knowing you had to turn and walk away soon. "I think I'll try the cannoli," Carla said, studying the menu. "Sophia, what would you like?" "The tiramisu sounds good," she answered, not really caring. Her eyes kept drifting back to the small area where Donati had performed, now momentarily empty. As they waited for their desserts, Sophia noticed a small commotion near the back of the restaurant. Several diners were pointing their phones toward the kitchen area, where Donati had emerged and was speaking with the restaurant owner. The soprano laughed at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm in a friendly gesture. Sophia couldn't hear their conversation from this distance, but Donati's body language suggested she was asking for something. The owner nodded enthusiastically, then gestured to the pianist who had been taking a break. The pianist listened as Donati spoke to him, nodding occasionally and looking intrigued. Whatever Donati was planning, it clearly wasn't part of the usual program. "I wonder what's happening," Carla murmured, also noticing the activity. Before Luis could respond, their desserts arrived, a beautifully presented tiramisu dusted with cocoa powder for Sophia, cannoli for her mother, and a rich chocolate torte for her father. Sophia picked up her spoon but found herself too distracted to eat. Something was about to happen. She could feel it. She was right. Donati was making her way through the restaurant again, moving between tables with graceful purpose. But this time she wasn't making casual conversation with the patrons. She was coming directly toward Sophia's family. "She's coming back," Sophia whispered, her spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. Luis and Carla turned in their seats, surprise evident on their faces as Donati approached their table again. "Hello again," the soprano said warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting your dessert." "Not at all," Luis replied, gesturing for her to sit if she wanted. Donati remained standing this time, her posture suggesting this wasn't just a social visit. She looked directly at Sophia, her expression both kind and serious. "Sophia, I have a proposition for you," she said. The restaurant had grown unusually quiet, as nearby diners realized something out of the ordinary was occurring. "I was wondering if you might consider joining me for a song during my final set this evening." Sophia's spoon clattered onto her plate. She stared at Donati, sure she must have misheard. You want me to sing? Here, with you?" Each word came out higher than the last. Donati nodded. Just one piece, O mio babbino caro. You mentioned it's the aria you know best. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands began to tremble. The very thought of standing up in front of all these people made her stomach twist into knots. She looked desperately at her parents, hoping they would save her from having to answer. But her parents seemed as shocked as she was. Luis recovered first, clearing his throat. Ms. Donati, that's incredibly generous of you, he began carefully. But Sophia has significant stage fright. She hasn't performed publicly before. I understand, Donati said, her voice gentle. That's partly why I'm asking. Sometimes the only way past fear is through it, with someone beside you. She crouched down slightly to be at eye level with Sophia. I would sing most of it. You could join whenever you felt ready, or not at all, if the moment doesn't feel right. More diners had noticed the conversation now. Whispers rippled through the restaurant. Is that Donati talking to a child? What's happening? Is she offering a duet? Sophia felt dozens of curious eyes turning toward their table. The attention only increased her anxiety. Her throat felt tight, her palms sweaty. I don't think I can, she whispered, looking down at her lap. Donati didn't push. Instead, she asked a simple question. May I tell you why I'm asking? Sophia nodded slightly, still not meeting her eyes. When I was watching you during my performance, I saw something rare. A true connection to the music. Not just appreciation, but understanding. Donati's voice dropped lower as if sharing a confidence. I've performed for thousands of people in some of the greatest opera houses in the world, Sophia. But sometimes, singing for one person who truly understands is more meaningful than singing for 1,000 who merely applaud. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm not asking you to sing for all these people, Donati continued. I'm asking if you would sing with me for the music itself. These people, she gestured around the restaurant, they're just witnesses to something that's really between you, me, and Puccini. A tiny spark flickered in Sophia's chest. Not confidence exactly, but something close to curiosity. What would it be like to sing with Elisa Donati? To blend her voice with one of the great sopranos of their time? The thought was terrifying, but also tempting. Carla reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. It's completely your choice, honey. We'll support whatever you decide. Luis nodded in agreement, though Sophia could see a hopeful gleam in his eyes. Her father had always believed in her talent, had always wished she could find a way past her fear. Sophia took a deep breath, considering. She thought about all the times she'd sung this aria in her bedroom, imagining herself on a stage. She thought about Mrs. Abernathy's faith in her abilities. She thought about Donati's story of her own stage fright and how she'd overcome it step by step. You said you would sing most of it? Sophia asked, her voice barely audible. Donati nodded. Absolutely. I'll begin, and only if you feel ready, you can join. No pressure, no expectations. Sophia looked up at her parents. Her mother squeezed her hand encouragingly. Her father gave her a small nod that said, It's okay either way. Then Sophia did something that surprised even herself. She nodded. Okay, she said. The word came out in a whisper. Really? Donati's face lit up with genuine pleasure. I might not be able to actually, make any sound, Sophia warned, already feeling the familiar tightness in her throat. But I'll try. That's all anyone can ask, Donati said, straightening up. And Sophia? It's okay to be scared. I still get scared before I sing sometimes. By now, nearly everyone in the restaurant was watching their exchange. Sophia could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing pressing down on her shoulders. She focused on her breathing, the way Mrs. Abernathy had taught her. In through the nose, deep into the belly, out through slightly parted lips. When is the last set? Sophia asked. In about 15 minutes, Donati replied. Just enough time for you to finish your dessert? She smiled warmly. Tiramisu is my favorite too. Excellent choice. With that, Donati returned to the back room, leaving Sophia to face what she had just agreed to. As soon as the soprano was out of earshot, Sophia turned to her parents, panic rising in her chest. What did I just do? She gasped. I can't sing in front of all these people. You don't have to, her mother reminded her gently. You agreed to try, that's all. If you change your mind, or if you get up there and can't do it, that's perfectly okay. Ms. Donati will understand, her father added. She's been where you are. Sophia pushed her tiramisu away, her appetite completely gone. The restaurant seemed too warm suddenly, the chattering of the other diners too loud. She could already imagine their disappointed faces when she froze on stage, when her voice failed her as it always did in public. But something else was happening inside her too, a tiny voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. Elisa Donati would be right there beside her. She wouldn't be facing the audience alone. I should practice, Sophia said suddenly, standing up. Is there a bathroom I can go to? Her mother pointed toward the back of the restaurant. I saw a sign near the kitchen. Sophia hurried toward the restroom, seeking a moment of privacy. Inside, she was grateful to find it empty. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection, a pale-faced girl with wide, frightened eyes. You can do this, she whispered to herself. Or at least you can try. She hummed a few notes, then sang the opening phrase of O mio babino caro, very softly, testing her voice. It came out thin and shaky, nothing like how she sounded at home or in Mrs. Abernathy's studio. She tried again, focusing on her breathing, trying to find that place inside herself where the music lived. A toilet flushed in one of the stalls, startling her. She hadn't realized someone else was there. An older woman emerged, washing her hands at the sink next to Sophia. You have a lovely voice, dear, the woman said kindly. Are you the one singing with Ms. Donati? Everyone's talking about it. Sophia felt her face grow hot. I'm supposed to, but I don't know if I can. The woman dried her hands on a paper towel. Well, I'll be rooting for you. She smiled encouragingly before leaving. Alone again, Sophia took several more deep breaths. The restroom door opened again, and this time her mother poked her head in. Are you okay, honey? It's almost time. Sophia nodded, though she wasn't okay at all. Her legs felt like they might give way beneath her. But she followed her mother back to their table, where her father was waiting with an encouraging smile. Across the restaurant, Sophia could see the pianist taking his position. A waiter had placed a microphone stand on the small stage, something new, as Donati hadn't used one for her previous sets. The restaurant lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the diners. The moment had arrived. Elisa Donati stepped onto the small stage, more beautiful than ever in the soft lighting. She smiled at the room full of expectant faces. Ladies and gentlemen, for my final set this evening, I'd like to begin with something a little different, she announced. I've had the pleasure of meeting a very talented young singer here tonight, and I've invited her to join me for one piece. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was really happening. Sophia, Donati said, extending her hand toward their table. Would you come up here, please? All eyes in the restaurant turned to Sophia. The walk from her table to the small stage felt like the longest journey of her life. Each step required a conscious effort, her legs moving mechanically beneath her. The room seemed to tilt slightly, faces blurring around her. And then she was standing beside Elisa Donati, feeling impossibly small next to the poised soprano. Donati gave her a reassuring smile and whispered so only Sophia could hear. Remember, I'll start. You just listen. Join in only if you want to. This is about joy, not fear. Sophia nodded, unable to speak. The pianist began the gentle, flowing introduction to O mio babino caro. Sophia recognized the notes immediately. She had heard them, had sung them, hundreds of times before. But never like this. Never with dozens of strangers watching. Never with Elisa Donati standing beside her. As the introduction ended, Donati took a breath and began to sing. The moment of truth had arrived. Elisa Donati's voice filled the restaurant with the opening lines of O mio babino caro. The familiar melody wrapped around Sophia like a warm embrace. Standing beside the famous soprano, Sophia felt both terrified and strangely calm at the same time. Her eyes remained fixed on the floor, unable to look at the sea of faces watching them. O mio babino caro, Donati sang, her rich voice carrying the plea of a young girl begging her father for understanding. Mi piace è bello bello. The aria was short, barely 2 minutes long, but in that moment, it seemed to stretch into infinity. Sophia knew every note, every breath, every subtle change in dynamics. She had sung it countless times in her bedroom, imagining herself on a grand stage. Yet now, when that imaginary scenario had somehow become reality, her voice seemed locked away inside her chest. From the corner of her eye, Sophia could see her parents watching from their table. Her father sat forward in his chair, hands clasped tightly together as if in prayer. Her mother's eyes shone with unshed tears, a hopeful smile on her face. They believed in her, even if she didn't believe in herself. Donati continued into the heart of the aria, her voice swelling with emotion as she sang of love and desperation. She glanced sideways at Sophia, not with pressure or expectation, but with gentle invitation. "Join me when you're ready," her eyes seemed to say, "or not at all. It's your choice." Sophia took a shaky breath, feeling the music move through her. The pianist played the familiar chords that had accompanied her own practice sessions for years. The notes called to her like old friends, asking why she remained silent when she knew their song so well. Donati reached the midpoint of the aria, the place where the melody climbed higher, expressing the character's growing emotional plea. "Mi strugo e mi tormento," she sang, her voice soaring effortlessly to the higher notes, and then something shifted inside Sophia. Perhaps it was hearing those notes sung so beautifully beside her. Perhaps it was remembering all the times she had hit those same notes perfectly in the safety of her room. Or perhaps it was simply that the music finally overpowered her fear. Almost without conscious decision, Sophia's lips parted. A small tentative sound emerged, barely audible at first, a whisper of melody joining Donati's stronger voice. Donati heard it immediately. Her eyes flickered with surprise and delight, but she maintained her professional focus, not breaking the flow of the music. Instead, she adjusted her volume slightly, creating space for Sophia's voice to be heard. Sophia took another breath, deeper this time, the way Mrs. Abernathy had taught her. "Oh Dio," she sang, her voice growing stronger, merging with Donati's on the passionate cry to God. "Vorrei morir." A ripple of surprise passed through the restaurant. Diners who had been eating paused with forks midway to their mouths. Waiters stopped in their tracks. Everyone stared at the small girl who was suddenly producing a sound that seemed impossible for her size and age. Sophia didn't notice any of this. Something extraordinary was happening to her. As she continued to sing, the restaurant around her seemed to fade away. The faces watching her blurred into insignificance. There was only the music, the beautiful melody that had lived inside her for so long, finally finding its way into the world. Donati, recognizing the moment for what it was, made a split-second decision. On the next phrase, she softened her voice further, becoming harmony to Sophia's melody, allowing the girl's pure soprano to take the lead. Sophia felt the shift, heard her own voice suddenly prominent in the duet. For a heartbeat, panic threatened to return, but the music carried her forward. Her body remembered what to do even as her mind struggled to process what was happening. She opened her throat, supported from her diaphragm, and let the sound flow freely. "Mi strugo e mi tormento," she sang again, her young voice clear and true on the climbing notes. "O Dio, vorrei morir." A woman at a nearby table pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes widening in amazement. The maître d', who had been checking on a table in the corner, stood frozen, his professional composure momentarily forgotten as he stared at the unlikely duo on the small stage. Sophia and Donati reached the final phrases together, their voices blending in perfect harmony despite the difference in their ages and experience. The aria built toward its emotional climax, a young girl declaring she will go to Porta Rossa to throw herself into the Arno River if she cannot be with her love. The high note approached the moment that separated skilled singers from truly gifted ones. Sophia had always nailed this note at home, but had never attempted it with an audience. As they reached the pinnacle, Donati prepared to carry it if necessary. She didn't need to. Sophia hit the high note with perfect pitch and surprising power, her young voice crystal clear and unwavering. The sound seemed to hang in the air, filling the restaurant with its purity. Several diners audibly gasped. The pianist, a seasoned professional who had accompanied many singers over the years, nearly missed a chord in his astonishment. He recovered quickly, providing the gentle accompaniment for the aria's closing lines. As they sang the final notes together, Sophia finally dared to lift her eyes from the floor. First she looked at Donati, who was watching her with unconcealed wonder and pride. Then hesitantly she allowed her gaze to sweep across the restaurant. What she saw shocked her. Many of the diners had tears in their eyes, An elderly man near the front was openly weeping. A waitress stood with a tray of drinks, seemingly having forgotten her purpose as she stared at Sophia. Every face showed some variation of the same expression, utter amazement. And her parents. Her father was gripping the edge of the table, his face a mixture of shock and joy. Her mother had both hands pressed to her heart, tears streaming down her cheeks. The final note faded. For a moment, complete silence filled the restaurant, a silence so profound it seemed to have weight and substance. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered from every corner, people leaping to their feet, cheering and whistling. It was the kind of response usually reserved for major opera houses after a particularly moving performance. Not the kind of thing one expected in a suburban Italian restaurant on an ordinary Saturday night. Sophia stood frozen, overwhelmed by the reaction. The applause washed over her like a physical force, almost making her step back. Donati placed a steadying hand on her shoulder and leaned down to speak in her ear. "Breathe," she reminded her gently. "You did it, Sophia. That was extraordinary." Sophia nodded, unable to speak. She had done it. After years of hiding her voice, after countless failed attempts at public singing, she had finally broken through her fear. Not completely. Her legs still felt like jelly and her hands trembled at her sides, but enough to let her voice be heard. The applause continued, showing no signs of abating. Phones had appeared in many hands, recording the moment. Sophia realized with a jolt that people had been filming during their performance. Her voice, her breakthrough moment, had been captured forever. Donati gestured for Sophia to take a bow. Hesitantly, she bent forward slightly, the way she'd seen performers do on videos. This prompted another wave of applause and cheers. Should I go back to my seat now?" Sophia whispered to Donati, uncertain of the protocol. Donati smiled. "In a moment. They love you, Sophia. Let them show their appreciation." As the applause finally began to subside, a man at a table near the front stood up. He was well-dressed, with silver hair and a distinguished bearing. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice carrying over the diminishing applause. "I hope you'll forgive the interruption, but I feel compelled to speak." Donati raised an eyebrow, looking at the man with curiosity. "My name is Thomas Wellington," he continued. "I'm the director of the Metropolitan Youth Opera program." A murmur ran through the restaurant. Even Sophia, with her limited knowledge of the professional music world, recognized the name of the prestigious program that trained young singers for potential careers in opera. "I came here tonight to hear Miss Donati, an old friend," Wellington explained. "I never expected to discover a new talent as well." He looked directly at Sophia. "Young lady, I would be honored if you would consider auditioning for our program. With the right training, a voice like yours could go very far indeed." Sophia blinked, sure she had misheard. An audition? For the Metropolitan Youth Opera program? It seemed impossible. Something from a dream or a movie, not her real life. Donati leaned down again. "You don't have to answer now," she whispered. "Take your time." Sophia nodded gratefully, too overwhelmed to form words. Wellington smiled understandingly and sat back down, having said his piece. Donati turned to address the restaurant patrons. "Thank you all for your wonderful response. Sophia will be returning to her family now, but I'll continue with my planned set, though I admit, it will be hard to follow such a remarkable performance." This prompted a warm laugh from the audience and another round of applause as Donati guided Sophia back to her table. The short walk felt surreal. Strangers reached out to touch her arm or shoulder as she passed, murmuring congratulations and words of amazement. When she finally reached her parents, her father stood and wrapped her in a tight embrace. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Her mother joined the hug, creating a protective circle around her. "We are so proud of you," she said, wiping away tears. As Sophia sank into her chair, her legs finally giving out, she realized Donati had begun her next song. But the soprano's solo voice, though still magnificent, now seemed somehow incomplete to Sophia's ears. For those brief magical moments, their voices had become something greater than either could achieve alone. A glass of water appeared before her, placed by a smiling waiter. "Compliments of the house," he said with a wink, "for our star performer." As Sophia sipped the water, she noticed people at nearby tables still watching her, whispering to each other with expressions of wonder. Several had their phones out, presumably replaying videos of the performance they'd just witnessed. Did that really happen? Sophia asked her parents, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father laughed softly. It really did. And it was magical. How did you do it? Her mother asked. What changed? Sophia considered the question, trying to identify the moment when fear had given way to music. I don't know exactly, she admitted. At first I was just listening to Ms. Donati, and then it was like the music was pulling my voice out, like it needed to be sung and I was just letting it happen. As Donati continued her set, Sophia sat in a daze, processing what had just occurred. For years, her voice had been her most private treasure, shared only with her parents and Mrs. Abernathy. Now, in the span of 2 minutes, everything had changed. Strangers had heard her sing. Someone had offered her an audition. Videos of her performance were probably already being shared. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the beginning of something new. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Sophia. Elisa Donati completed her final set to enthusiastic applause, though many eyes in the restaurant kept drifting back to Sophia's table. When Donati took her final bow, she gestured toward Sophia, prompting another round of applause directed at the young girl. Sophia managed a shy wave, her cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and unexpected pride. As the regular restaurant buzz resumed and diners returned to their meals, a steady stream of people approached Sophia's table. Some just wanted to express their amazement, while others asked if she performed regularly or took formal lessons. One woman tearfully explained that her mother, who had loved opera, had recently passed away, and hearing Sophia sing had felt like a beautiful tribute. Sophia answered their questions quietly, still processing everything that had happened. Yes, she took lessons. No, she had never performed in public before. Yes, she loved Puccini especially. You should start a YouTube channel, suggested a young man who identified himself as a music student. Your voice is incredible. People would go crazy for it. The idea seemed absurd to Sophia, who just hours earlier hadn't been able to sing in front of a single stranger. Yet something had shifted inside her tonight, and possibilities that once seemed impossible now felt. Well, not easy, but perhaps within reach. As the crowd around their table finally thinned, Elisa Donati approached once more, now wearing a light jacket over her performance dress and carrying a small purse. May I join you for a moment? She asked Sophia's parents. Of course, Luis replied, pulling out a chair for her. Donati sat down, turning to Sophia with a warm smile. Well, that was quite something, wasn't it? Sophia nodded, suddenly feeling shy again in the presence of the professional singer. Thank you for making me do that. I didn't make you do anything, Donati corrected gently. You chose to sing. I just provided an opportunity. I've never heard her sing like that, Carla said, her voice still thick with emotion. I mean, we knew she had talent, but tonight was... She trailed off, shaking her head in wonder. Special, Donati finished for her. It was special. That's the magic of music. It can surprise even those who make it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card, which she placed on the table in front of Sophia's parents. This is my contact information. I meant what I said earlier about stage fright being conquerable. If Sophia is interested, I'd be happy to work with her occasionally when I'm in town. Luis picked up the card, looking slightly dazed. You would mentor her? I'd consider it a privilege, Donati said simply. Talents like Sophia's are rare. They deserve nurturing. She turned to Sophia directly. I also heard what Thomas Wellington said to you. He's a good man and an excellent educator. His program is among the best for young singers. If you decide to audition, I'd be happy to help you prepare. Sophia's mind raced. Just this morning, she had been a girl who couldn't sing in front of anyone. Now she was being offered mentorship from a world-class soprano and the chance to audition for a prestigious youth opera program. It was too much to process all at once. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she admitted honestly. Donati nodded understandingly. There's no rush. Tonight was a big step. You can take the next steps at your own pace. She reached out and lightly touched Sophia's hand. But know this. What happened tonight wasn't a fluke or an accident. That voice is truly yours, Sophia. It's been inside you all along. With those words, Donati stood to leave. I should be going. I'm staying with my sister while I'm in town, and I promised to be back before her kids' bedtime so I could sing them a lullaby. The image of the glamorous soprano singing lullabies to her nieces or nephews made Sophia smile. It was a reminder that even famous performers had normal lives, normal families. "Thank you again," Luis said, standing to shake Donati's hand, not just for the opportunity but for giving Sophia the courage to take it. The courage was all hers, Donati replied. She gave Sophia one last smile. "Remember how this felt, Sophia? The fear, yes, but also what came after. The joy of letting your voice be heard." After Donati left, the Martinez family lingered at their table, none of them quite ready to end this extraordinary evening. The restaurant had begun to empty with only a few tables still occupied. "Should we head home?" Carla asked eventually, noticing Sophia trying to stifle a yawn. Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The emotional journey of the evening had drained her completely. As they prepared to leave, the restaurant owner approached their table. He was a round-faced man with a warm smile, dressed in a suit that seemed slightly too tight around the middle. "Scusi," he said, his accent thick but his English clear. "I wanted to thank you for making my restaurant part of such a special night." He handed Luis a business card. "Your family is welcome here any time. And," he added with a wink toward Sophia, "if your daughter ever wants to sing here again, she has an open invitation." Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the restaurant. Sophia took deep breaths, feeling like she was waking from an intense dream. But the business cards tucked carefully into her father's wallet proved it had been real. They walked toward the parking lot in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they reached their car, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. "It's from Tia Rosa," she said, referring to her mother's sister. "She says she just saw a video of me singing with Elisa Donati on social media. It's already getting shared around." "That was fast," Luis remarked as he unlocked the car. "The internet moves quickly," Carla said, "especially for something as remarkable as what happened tonight." Sophia slid into the back seat, her mind trying to grasp this new reality. People she didn't know were watching her sing. Strangers were hearing her voice. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. As they drove home through the quiet streets, Sophia's phone kept buzzing with notifications. Messages from her cousins, from her mother's piano students, from classmates who had seen the videos. Everyone wanted to know the same things. How did this happen? Was it planned? Had she been secretly training as a singer for years? "You don't have to answer everyone tonight," her mother advised, noticing Sophia's overwhelmed expression in the rearview mirror. "This can all wait until tomorrow." Sophia nodded gratefully and put her phone away. She leaned her head against the cool window glass, watching streetlights blur past. "What are you thinking about?" her father asked softly, glancing at her in the mirror. Sophia considered the question. "Everything feels different now," she finally said. "Like the world got bigger somehow." "That's what happens when we face our fears," her father replied. "The world expands." When they arrived home, Sophia headed straight for her room, craving the familiar comfort of her private space. Everything looked exactly as she had left it that afternoon. Her schoolbooks on the desk, posters of opera houses on the walls, her collection of CDs neatly arranged on the shelf. Yet she felt like a different person walking into this unchanged room. She changed into her pajamas and sat cross-legged on her bed, finally allowing herself to truly replay what had happened. She had sung in public, not just in public but with Elisa Donati, and people had liked it, had been moved by it even. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Mrs. Abernathy, her vocal teacher. "Sophia, I've just seen a video of you singing with Elisa Donati. I'm speechless with pride. Call me tomorrow, we have much to discuss." Sophia smiled at her teacher's excitement. Mrs. Abernathy had always believed in her, had insisted that someday Sophia would find her performance voice. She had been right after all. A gentle knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Her parents entered, her mother carrying a mug of hot chocolate, their family's traditional celebration drink. "We thought you might like this before bed," Carla said, placing the mug on Sophia's nightstand. "Thanks, Mom," Sophia replied, the familiar ritual comforting amidst all the evening's changes. Her parents sat on the edge of her bed, clearly wanting to talk but uncertain where to begin. "So," her father finally said, "a lot happened tonight." Sophia nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Yeah. We want you to know," her mother continued, that nothing has to change unless you want it to. You don't have to audition for that program, or take up Ms. Donati's mentorship offer, or perform again at all if you don't want to. But if you do want those things, her father added, we'll support you every step of the way. Sophia took a sip of her hot chocolate, considering their words. I'm still scared, she admitted. Tonight was amazing, but I don't know if I could do it again. Fear doesn't just disappear, her father said. Even professional performers still get nervous. But they learn to walk alongside their fear, not let it block their path. Sophia thought about how she had felt on that small stage, terrified at first, but then something else had taken over. Something powerful and joyful. I think, she said slowly, I'd like to try again. Maybe not right away and maybe not anything big, but I don't want to go back to only singing in my room. Her parents exchanged pleased glances. Well then, her mother said, perhaps we should call Mrs. Abernathy tomorrow and tell her about Mr. Wellington's offer. She might have some thoughts on preparing for an audition, and we can reach out to Ms. Donati in a few days, her father suggested. Once everything has settled a bit, they sat together for a while longer, talking about the evening's events, laughing about how the waiter had nearly dropped a tray when Sophia had hit the high note, marveling at how quickly the videos had spread online. Later, after her parents had said goodnight and Sophia was alone in her darkened room, she pulled up one of the videos on her phone. It felt strange to watch herself, to hear her own voice blending with Donati's. The Sophia on the screen looked scared but determined, her voice growing stronger with each note. As the video ended, Sophia noticed something she hadn't been aware of in the moment, the pure joy that had spread across her face during the final notes. It was an expression she had never seen on herself before, the look of someone who had found her purpose, her voice, her courage. 6 months later, Sophia Martinez would step onto the stage of the city's Grand Opera House, invited as a special guest to perform a duet with Elisa Donati during her sold-out concert. The audience would include Mrs. Abernathy, beaming with teacher's pride, Thomas Wellington, who had already accepted Sophia into his program, and of course her parents, who had believed in her voice even when she couldn't believe in it herself. But the seeds of that future performance had been planted on this night, in a small Italian restaurant, when a 12-year-old girl with an extraordinary gift had finally found the courage to share it with the world.